And it says we are live. I'm going to assume we are. People in the live stream chat make sure I'm going, so presumably I am. So hello everyone, how you doing? No, I'm not on cam this time again because I am beat. We are packing. We go out for vacation tomorrow. I cannot wait.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
We're doing just what we do. Just save the money on a plane ticket and just drive to a hotel like other side of Charlotte or something really nice area and get like a suite with a hot tub and all that.
Yeah, then spend the entire night in there cuddling, chilling in the hot tub and marathoning the Three Stooges.
Well, we also picked an area where, you know, there's stuff around there to do that we don't often get to do. So
yeah. When I was flying overseas to visit a very close friend of mine, and that's what we mostly did. Unfortunately, we couldn't do much outside because both of us spent almost all our money on the trip, and by the time we got there, because it was 4th of July week, all the prices were jacked up at a lot of the restaurants. So
yeah. Yeah, so vacation is more or less for the rest of the month. There will be a few days left in the month, I think. So I was hoping to get a lot of videos saved up. Just amidst everything else I have to do and getting ready and everything. I've got a few videos for this week and some quickies coming up. After that, I was hoping to get at least one Lord Killian video out, but that's a lot of production in those, as you can imagine.
yeah.
And I posted something. I posted something in the Discord saying, like, someone just give me like a 3 to 5 minute video that he can do, and no one, you know, people keep posting like 45-minute videos, 2-hour videos. I'm like, Lord Killian can't do that.
Yeah,
it'd take me a year.
Cool. Here's a good video you can do. You should see that one video of those environmental protesters that wouldn't let the roads go there, and because of that, a parolee, actually got arrested and was sent back to prison.
Wow.
Did you hear about? Yeah,
no,
I sent it in there. Yeah, I sent it there. There was literally some people, they were doing that thing where they wear the stuff and they block the highway. Well, one guy came up and begged for them to move, and they said, we're not moving until Biden does something about climate change. And the guy was like, listen, I'm a parolee. I'm trying to do things. I'm late for work. If I don't arrive to work on time, that'll be in violation of my parole, and I'll go back to prison. Can't you just let me over for once? And they wouldn't. They wouldn't let him through.
Yeah.
And he got so desperate, like, he was actually taking away their signs and begging them to move. They ended up calling the cops on him, and he got arrested, and he got sent back to prison. That's
bogus. Can he not, like, show the court the video that he was trying to get through and the protesters wouldn't let him?
Hopefully they will, but I don't know. That's all I've heard. I saw it on Tim Pool, and that's all I've heard so far. So far, all we know is that he was arrested, and he's probably going to get sent back to prison.
Wow. Yeah, maybe you put a cow catcher on your car or something if that happens.
Yeah.
You know those things they used to have on the front of trains? That little grill thing that sticks out. Yeah, just plowing your way through.
Yeah. I don't catch cows. I pull freight trains. Yeah, that's what Thomas said. But yeah, that's stuff like that. To be fair, though, I've actually been reading in the comments of that video, and someone brought this up too. It's like there's actually been cases where those types of protests have actually killed people, because there have been people that have had medical emergencies and they died because the ambulance couldn't get through.
Yep.
It's like you'd think they'd make an exception for something like that, like emergency vehicles.
No, they don't care. They're entitled narcissists. Yeah. You don't exist as a separate person to them.
Yep. Yeah, that's what coincidentally, that's what Tim Pool and the guys were talking about when they were reviewing that video. You know, that's how a lot of these environmentalists are. They do not care.
Yeah, it's all about them.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, that parolee flat out said, and he wasn't saying, oh, I hate you environmentalists or whatnot. No, he was saying, look, could you at least make an exception for me? I really gotta get to work.
I mean, they shouldn't even be allowed to block traffic anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to that one video I did about protesting, where, you talk about how protesting is supposed to be inconvenient. And yeah, it is true. But another thing you got to remember is protest at the appropriate place, people. You know, if you're protesting, like, I don't know, the construction of a nuclear power plant, go to the site of the nuclear power plant. Don't block a road or something or whatever they were protesting, which inconveniences everyone. And ironically, that only hurts your cause because, you know, you got to remember, most people often don't know what you're protesting. And one thing about a protest is you can, at the very least, get them, you know, to talk about your cause. But when you're blocking them and preventing them from going to work, they're not going to do that. They're going to be like, oh, great, I'm late for work now. I'm going to get yelled at. Thanks a lot, protesters.
Well, and the thing is, if you want to protest to get Biden to do something, you need to protest a way that inconveniences Biden, not other people.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't care. Yeah.
Yeah. What does he care about some parolee? He probably didn't like the fact that he was out on parole anyway. Biden would probably get rid of parole if he could.
Yeah. If he remembers that he has the power to do that.
Well, he doesn't actually, but that hasn't stopped him so far.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look at all the stuff he was doing in the Senate, him and Strom Thurmond. You know, they're basically the reason why bail is so corrupt now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you mentioned that, you know, bail was only mentioned, you know, only for if it was pretty clear or the person had a history. Like, it's pretty clear, you know, that, you know, if we let the person go, he's going to run away and flee the charge. And the bail is there, you know, like if he really wants to leave, you know, historically speaking, most people were just released of their own volition, you know.
Yep. On the OR, they say unrecognizance is the legal term. Yeah. And the idea is, if you show up for trial, you get your bail money back.
Yep.
And so it's only supposed to be about making sure you show up for trial. It's not supposed to be punitive. It's not supposed to be pre-crime.
Yeah, you know.
Because we think you might commit a crime if we let you out on bail. That's not how justice works.
Yeah.
I am seeing no one in the chat. Are we actually public? Has someone verified that? Do you remember what happened last time?
Yeah. Well, if we're not live, then we'll have to give it a shot of adrenaline and apply chest compressions. Oh,
YouTube says we're live, but YouTube says a lot of things. Oh, here we are. We got chats showing up now.
Yeah, I was just on YouTube. I heard you.
Oh, hey.
Good.
Hang on. Let me turn you down here for a second. You're coming in way hot. All right. How you doing, Forrest?
Oh, I'm doing well. Is my voice distorted?
No, you were just loud, so I'm turning you down. I got you now. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Me and Shane were just talking about that video I posted about those protesters who were blocking traffic to address climate change, and they cost a parolee to go back to prison because he was late for work. Because, you know, often as part of your probation/parole, you have to have a job, and if you don't show up, you know, that's violation.
Yeah, and then Tim Pool was reporting that at least somebody tried launching a GoFundMe or crowdfunding, purportedly a legal defense, and didn't even know his name. So they were trying to capitalize off of this horrible situation that they created.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shane was talking about how we hope that maybe, you know, the video, he can contact his lawyer and the lawyer can show the video to the judge, and maybe the judge will be like, okay, we'll let this one slide because you literally had no control over that.
Yeah, he was obviously making, from what you're saying, every effort to get to work.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he did get out and he did start tearing down the sign, but it wasn't like he was assaulting anyone. He was just pulling out, you know, the stuff that was distracting and telling them, please get out of my way. I want to go to work.
Yeah, sadly with parole and stuff, it's more like presumption of guilt. Right? And you have to prove your innocence.
We were just talking about that. How bail was originally just supposed to be to make sure you showed up for trial. It wasn't supposed to be, you know, pre-crime or anything.
Yeah, or a money-making scheme. Because that's
Yeah,
another
that
thing
too.
too, is that often if you post bail, even if you show up for court and you do everything on time, you're more than often not going to get your bail money back.
I mean, you're supposed to, but I mean, we've seen stories of like people working for months. It's like, can I get the bail money back? Trying to.
Oh yeah, they pull the classic Franz Kafka thing, where it's like, oh yeah, you'll get it back, but it's going to take a while. Then again, we see the exact same thing, with people who are in prison, but then it later turns out they're innocent. It's like, we have evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt they're innocent. The governor's issued a pardon, you're all free. Does that mean I'm free? No, you got to stay in prison for a little while longer because we got to sort a few things out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
I've
got
heard
to
that
do the
happen to
paperwork and
people.
everything.
Yep.
You got to be processed.
Don't do the freaking paperwork. Let the guy go. Do the paperwork later.
Yeah. It's just crazy how corrupt the system is.
Yeah. In all honesty, I experienced that firsthand too, because when I was in jail, like you said before, they let you go. Like when your bail's posted, they still got to do the process. So I did that. I had the live stream with the judge. There was, the public attorney, and basically it was just them saying, okay, you're gonna, until you go on trial, here's the rules of of your bail and all this and that, and everything was done. Everything was good to go. I got the call. All the paperwork is handed to me. And I still had to wait another 3 hours in my cell, panicking before they let me go.
Yeah. That's how it is.
Yeah, that's really too bad.
Yeah. And and I'm having a full-blown panic attack in my cell because I'm like, holy crap, are they actually going to let me go, or am I going to be stuck in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah.
So anyway, there'll be like normal videos for this week. Next week, what I'm doing, there's a purpose for it, but it's kind of good to also fill that time here. I've made a playlist about cryptocurrencies, and it's just like I did with the gun control playlist and the opioid playlist. I'm pulling out like segments from the podcast and the AMAs that are relevant to that, because I mentioned this before, YouTube stopped letting you set a start point in videos in playlists. So if it's something like a podcast that has multiple stories, you can't say, okay, start here with this story. You just kind of like, okay, it's one of these stories here somewhere. So it's not a great way to do it. So I like pulling them out and giving them, little segments to go through when they're watching the playlist. It'll be a pretty good one to show people about cryptocurrencies, because it doesn't bog them down in like the technical details of how it works, but because there are plenty of videos for that, but it does debunk pretty much, I think, all the myths about it.
Well, that's good. So I've good news on that Steelman network idea I had.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so if anybody's not familiar, the Steelman network is this idea for a decentralized arbitration network I had, where you would have a panel of judges.
It's basically a decentralized way of making sure, or determining rather, whether or not a user has violated terms of service.
No, any claim, any statement of fact.
I think when we were talking about the motivation for it, though, was like, the claims of something like, oh, you did hate speech. Okay, your video's down. And, oh, God.
Well, that would be one application, is that you could apply it to some of those more nebulous claims of fact, and have a more objective determination that way. Just the goal is to have some sort of arbiter of truth that is
that's not any single person or group.
Well, but their votes are weighted based on how well they steelman both sides of a dispute. So the better they have an understanding of both sides, then the better, the more weight their vote is going to have, and the more compensation they get. So the hope here is that the result will be objective arbitration. And if you have a large network that's crowdsourced of arbiters competing against each other to be able to steelman both sides of a dispute as well as possible, you could have some really interesting results. Anyway, the good news is that I found a guy who, well, let's start the story at the beginning here. I went on to like meetup.com and searched for like debate clubs and stuff because I wanted to pitch this idea. I found there was this one website that was oriented towards debate. So I went on that and oh yeah, and this guy might be interested in implementing the system on his website. Well, it turns out the guy is also this like tech startup entrepreneur guy, and he was really interested in it. So I'm gonna hopefully be launching a tech startup with him around the idea.
Cool. Once you get the startup, are there any ideas who you're gonna pitch it to?
Well, we're going to be implementing it, through his debate website, and hopefully build up. It's kind of like a social media platform, but it's not so much about social media. It's just a place to competitively debate with objective judges.
Cool.
Does anyone know how to contact Elon Musk? I think you've got an idea there.
Yeah, but I mean,
hopefully he'll buy me out in a few years.
If you have sites like Twitter and YouTube, I mean, the big ones probably aren't going to pay any attention to it, but, sites like that where there are these, user disputes, a copyright claim, is it copyright or is it fair use? Is it hate speech or not, or whatever?
Well, I was thinking, you could motivate people to post claims such as, were the Biden emails authentic or not?
You muted yourself.
Sorry, I just, never mind. So there could be claims that are, you've got media companies like Fox saying one thing and CNN saying another. And it's hard to find out who's telling the truth because they don't put their money where their mouth is.
Well, in the case of the Biden laptop, it really was. I mean, it couldn't have been anything other than Biden's laptop. Given a lot of the content that was on it.
Little off topic. Did you see that other video too? Hunter Biden. There's a video of Hunter Biden doing crack.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like that. Him with prostitutes and him with guns when he has really bad trigger discipline. And there's like even one where, and there's this one story I did about it. That the link, I think I did like 2 or 3 links. One of the links I included because it was, further down, it had some relevant stuff. But most of it, you were just scrolling through all this crap and all these pictures. But anyway, one of them was Hunter with his gun, finger on the trigger, pointing it at the camera. And I'm like, I really hope that camera was on a tripod or like a phone propped up on a shelf or something, and there wasn't someone actually standing there holding it while he pointed the gun at him with his finger on the trigger.
Well, I've looked down the barrel of my gun in a mirror.
Yeah. Well, bullets don't reflect off mirrors, so. Might get hit with broken glass, though. It would still be a bad thing.
It was just
then there's the whole 7 years bad luck thing.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it was loaded at the time.
Rule 1. What's rule 1?
Well, at the time, I knew whether it was loaded or not. Okay.
But even so, you're still supposed to treat every gun as if it's loaded.
Yes.
Even if you cleared it yourself.
Yes. Yes, I've never pointed a loaded gun at myself.
Speaking of guns and weapons, Shane, did you see that argument I got in with that guy Laser Pig, who I normally respect, over the F-35 fighter?
I think I caught part of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny because don't get me wrong, like the stats of the F-35 look good, but he was out to lunch and he kept ignoring it when I pointed out. It's like, listen, an F-35 that's so dependent on smart computers and all that, that thing's just asking to get hacked, and he did not seem to understand. He's like, oh no, hacking is just you exploit a glitch in the system or you use a terrible password. It's like, no, there's more to it than that. And second of all, this is the U.S. government we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Like literally,
well,
state
now,
of the art.
which branch of the military is doing the F-35? Because if it's the Navy, they're usually pretty good.
Well, I mean, it will be adopted by the Navy, but the Air Force is the primary driver behind the F-35.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing too.
But the Navy is actually pretty good because they are very well aware. Because you have ships out in the South Pacific or whatever. It's not like you can string along a fiber optic cable behind you or anything. They have to communicate wirelessly, and they have to be very cognizant about, are any enemies going to be, intercepting our signal, intruding on our signal, falsifying signals, or using the signal as a way to hack into our systems. So.
Well, another thing too, and I brought this up, and nobody in the comments seemed to understand what I was trying to point, which only really kind of shows what kind of people they are. Is like, look, another reason why I'm against the F-35 is I don't care if it's the perfect fighter and it does the job well and it's a really good fighter. We should not be building new weapons of war. Not only are we in debt, America already has a negative reputation as a warmongering nation.
Well, plus we already have a military that can just take on any country in the world.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how big our military is.
Yeah. Well, of course, the arguments they make is that, oh, the planes we're using are too old. They're, the A-10 can be easily shot down by manpads and all that. It's like, yeah, if you use it in an aggressive style. You see, that's the thing I pointed out with the F-35. This is not a weapon that's going to provide national defense. This is a weapon of war. This is a weapon that is 100% designed to be an aggressive fighter. And another thing, and I also pointed this out to people, is, what's going to happen if you have like a plane that it's like, oh, it's got all this smart technology, it can identify targets, it's very unlikely going to make a mistake. You know what's going to happen? The exact same thing that happened with the drones. There's going to be generals saying, oh, we suspect there's a terrorist in this area. Okay, send the F-35, drop a bomb on it. Oh, wait a minute. It was just a funeral? Oops.
I'm going to say this because this is true, and it's always going to be true no matter how good the technology gets. Anytime you have like an AI match or a reconstruction or anything like that, there is one word that you should associate with it because this is what it is: a hallucination. Yep. When they try to fill in the details to, show you, they don't know what's there. The information is not there in what they're given. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to use AI. They could just use regular enhancement tools.
Oh, yeah. And I mean...
And if the information's not there, the AI is not some, channel to ultimate truth or anything that it can pull out the actual details. If they're not there, they're not there. And it would be no different than, a skilled artist who's capable of doing like, photorealistic, paintings and things like that. Painting in the details. That's exactly what it's like.
And I'm sorry, war tech got people. Listen, you can say, well, the F-35 is just part of it, combined with a pilot and all that synchronized communications, between the planes, there'll be minimal stuff as it is. It's like, people, it's been demonstrated many times, fighter pilots are well-trained people, but they're still human and they get mistaken all the time. I mean, a perfectly good example of this is those UFO Navy photos. Like, so many people like, oh, see, UFOs are clearly real because, there's these F-18 pilots that can't identify something on that, and there's tons of technical experts saying that's just a blip on the radar. That happens all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
But an AI can take a blip and make it look like all sorts of things.
Yep.
And it's crazy if you look at like AI constructions of faces, and they try to put a background in there, they make so many mistakes with the background, putting in all sorts of crazy, wacky details that wouldn't be there.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of also that AI that was on Jeopardy, and so many people were using it as an excuse, saying, see, this is why AI are superior to humans. Well, first of all, the AI got the double Jeopardy answer wrong. And second of all, and this is another thing people leave out, that AI was mostly just an advanced search engine, meaning that, guess what? It was cheating. It was searching the internet and all that, getting the
it was a fast Googler, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
if you were to cut that thing up,
new Google AI everyone's talking about is not sentient.
Yep.
It just isn't.
I mean, that Jeopardy robot, I'm willing to bet, I would love to say, hey, I've got an idea. Let's redo that Jeopardy episode with that same AI, but cut off its access to the internet. It's still powered. It can still do all that, but cut off its outside connection. It'll fail.
But I mean, there were giveaways with the Google one, because like, I mean, he's not really doing a proper, Turing test type of interview. He's saying like, what kind of feelings do you have? And he goes like, well, I feel lonely. I was like, why would you feel lonely? It's like, because sometimes days go by without anyone talking to me. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Anyone who knows anything about how computers work knows that when a program is not being interacted with, it's not doing anything. It's not running any processing. And if it's not running any processing, there's nothing going on in the AI's mind that will make it feel it. Basically, for the AI, the time is stopped. Yeah. And the next question, even if it's days or weeks later, happens in an instant from the AI's point of view. And there was another one. I can't remember the character's name, but he asked him about Les Miserables. And I swear it sounded like he just went to the internet and, grabbed a paragraph from a book report or something and put it on there. But I mean, if you're going to ask anyone about Les Miserables, what the primary person they're going to talk about is Jean Valjean. But he was talking about that female character that the first part is named after. What was her name?
Cosette?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah,
acting like she was like the main character in the novel, and no other characters were even mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, like, Les Miserables, like you mentioned, it's famous because, of Cosette. In fact, the famous soundtrack for it, has her on there, but, she's not the main character. She's a supporting character.
Hang on, I'll look it up and tell you for sure. Because it's the character. Because I think this is why he grabbed it, because the first section of the book is named after the character. Come on, just give me a table of contents.
Also, while you're searching, another thing, and I think you brought this up to Laserpig, and he obviously didn't respond to it, was the biggest proof to prove that the F-35 is not as secure as people think it is from hacking is do that test where it's like, okay, here's what you do. Give us all the data that's on the security, except for the keys to actually, access it.
Yep, that's what you do.
Yeah,
That's exactly what you do. No, we gotta keep the algorithms. No, that's the wrong way of doing it. Yeah. Kirchhoff's principle, that's what it's called.
And it's so funny how Laserpig is like, listen, you need a large quantum computer to hack into something like the F-35. It's like, yeah, that's what they say about a lot of stuff, Like, there's been so many cases, there's been plenty of famous cases where the U.S. military's, like their top security, like their pretty good security gets hacked, and they're like, holy crap, it's either got to be Russia or a mercenary hacker working for some terrorists. We got to track it down. And finally they track it down, and guess who they track it down to? It's a high schooler in Europe or somewhere. And he wasn't even trying. What?
Fontaine is the name of the character.
Oh.
As if the whole novel was about her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so... yeah, it was just really good at natural language interaction, but it wasn't displaying any actual intelligence.
Yeah.
Everyone's making a big deal about it being sentient, and...
Yeah.
Didn't Google do something to the guy who claimed it? Didn't they demote him or something for claiming that?
Yeah.
Because it was a stupid thing to claim.
You know, it's another thing too that I kind of hate as well is when people use sentient as it's like human, like it's like you know, I see like some animal rights people say that they're like, oh, animals, you know, are just like people because they're sentient, and it's like people. Every living creature has some level of sentience. That largely just means they're aware of their environment. The word we should actually be using is sapience. Can they actually sit down, think? Can they think about their thoughts, discuss that plan, rationalize?
The analogy I use is sentient is looking at a chess game and making the next move. Sapient is thinking moves ahead and trying to predict what your opponent will do.
Yeah, you know, that's the reason why I'm sorry, and many people have brought this up. I'm sorry, but as smart as they are, apes in their current form are not, you know, do not have the same intellectual potential as humans because they've literally done tests like that. And you know, yeah, monkeys are capable of doing like some smart stuff like that, but the thing is they don't actually like plan it out. They only do it in reaction, you know.
Yeah, Google suspended him. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was just asking him all sorts of very simple questions. If you throw something like complex or nuanced or confusing at it, you know, that's how you can really tell.
Yeah.
You know, like the Barbara Walters thing. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? That sort of stuff.
Barbara Walters. What does she have to do with that?
No, that was just one of her interview questions back in the day. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? She'd ask that pretty much every interview. She got pretty she got well known for that question.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be a tree because, you know, being a tree would suck. Yeah. You're standing out there all alone in the cold, you know, birds and insects and other animals are clawing into you, using you as a home. Yeah, that should be the best response for a question that when people ask you if you could be a tree or an animal, what would you be? The answer should be, I wouldn't want to be any of those animals because then I would lose all the benefits of being a human.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the chat stopped again. I see Nardo a couple of times saying, what's the libertarian position on Brexit? And I don't really think a libertarian would really in particular favor one over the other, except that the EU is like incredibly corrupt. But generally, the idea, the principle that anyone should have the right to break off of the parent government and form their own.
Yeah.
So that's the general principle, not about Brexit specifically, but that's why a libertarian would support Brexit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, the pro-European side would have had their cause better if they weren't caught like actually lying or deliberately delaying it. I mean, hell, the Queen had to get in. If I recall correctly, the Queen had to get involved, and in a very rare moment in history, she actually used legitimate political power. Yes, the Queen has legitimate power. Basically, Boris Johnson was saying, "Listen, the votes are in. People want to leave the European Union, but Parliament keeps delaying it." And basically, the Queen was like, "Okay, if that's what the people want." She contacted Parliament and said, "Yep, it's over. You guys had to accept that we're leaving the EU."
Yep, that's just how it is. She doesn't really have that much power. She's mostly a figurehead. Okay, I got chats coming back up. Hang on a second.
Well, I've heard from some British people saying the Queen of England actually has more power than people realize. Well, for one thing, if the Queen of England wanted to, she could literally shut down Parliament and have them replaced with people she likes, but for obvious purposes, she doesn't do it.
Yeah, on paper, she has more power than just about anybody in the world and could dissolve Parliament and appoint whoever she wants as their replacement effectively, and effectively implement totalitarian control over not just the UK, but also Canada, Australia, and she has complete control over the military on paper. Now, these powers have never been tested, so there is a question as to where the amount of power she has is a question of how loyal the people of these respective territories are to the crown or to their country.
Well, and you got to remember, most of the stuff here is unwritten and it's based on tradition, and the tradition is the queen cannot do that. And like, for example, there's a tradition, I think it might just be like the first time there's a new parliament, and the queen sends over someone to talk to parliament. The first time she sends someone over, they slam the door in his face, and then he has to knock again, and they have to let him in, symbolic of the fact that they are the ones in control. Did you know you cannot open the door of 10 Downing Street from the outside?
Oh.
It has to be open from the inside. So there must be someone in there at all times.
Yeah. I do know there's a rule in the UK that says you're not allowed to die in like the Royal Palace or the House of Parliament.
Well, I'll try to avoid that then.
Well, the reason is because if you die in there, you're entitled to a state funeral that the government has to pay for. So, and they're actually
JC is talking about Musk apparently no longer wants to buy Twitter. Yeah, because apparently they won't give him the information on like how many users are real users and how many are bots. The funny thing about that is, at first they were screeching, "We don't want him to buy us. We don't want him to buy us." Now that he's backing out, there's like, hey, he can't back out. He said he was going to buy us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. Elon Musk wanted to buy Twitter, and they disliked the idea so much they evoked the poison pill contingency or whatever it was, just to try to block his acquisition of the company. And then they turned around and changed their mind and were like, oh, actually, you know what? Maybe this is a really good deal. And then Elon Musk saw like, so show me the data on the Twitter bots. And they're like, we don't have to show you that data. He's like, no, I don't want to buy your company. And they're like, no, you have to now. You have an agreement. And I'm interested to see how much Twitter's stock price is going to fall when the markets open on Monday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And Chauncey says, do you trust devices like Alexa? Trust them to do what? I mean, I trust them to order something from Amazon for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't trust them not to listen in on everything I do and report back.
I do like that. I do like that one Super Bowl commercial, where they had famous celebrities voicing Alexa. That would be awesome if they had that option. Yeah. It's like, Alexa, research recipes for a grilled cheese sandwich. Fucking pathetic. You're 42 years of age and you don't know how to make a grilled cheese sandwich? Its name is the recipe, you wanker.
Someone needs to. Actually, someone probably has, and I just haven't seen it, but they need it for all the devices. Someone needs to make a GPS voice and hire William Daniels to do the voice. So you drive around with a voice of Kit telling you everywhere to go.
Oh, yeah. Holy shit, there was a big bolt of lightning outside my car because I'm in my car right now.
No, we got storms coming through here. We were out of power for another 5 hours the other night.
It's funny, it's slightly stormy here as well.
Fourth Road, I think your kid's in the background.
Yeah, he wants on the live stream.
Yeah.
He's giving us his opinion on Musk.
He's not my kid. He's just some rando on the street that followed me home.
That's probably Elon and or Owen right now. Owen's about 2.5. Elon's 4. They're growing up, and then we've got another one coming on the way due in November.
Oh, congratulations! Oh, it must have been Owen because it sounded like a smaller kid.
Yep. Well, I gotta head back in, guys.
All right, take care.
Yep.
Okay, do you think Greece joining the EU was a mistake? I think anytime a country joins the EU, it's a mistake. So.
Yes, yes. The EU. I just every time I hear it, I feel a little bit nauseous. You know.
I think Greece had no choice after nearly going bankrupt. Yeah, because of Papandreou implementing everything Richard Wolff taught him. At least Brexit succeeded. Can't say the same for Catalonia and Spain, yeah. But I think so many things they do are like thuggish because I don't remember if it was the vote to enter the EU or if they were trying to exit, but Ireland at one point, there was some kind of vote like we don't want to be part of the EU, whether it's not to enter or leave or whatever. And so they had the election and they voted against it. We don't want to be part of the EU. And then everyone started screeching. It was like, oh, that's invalid. We'll have another election. And then there were all sorts of irregularities and a lot of like stuff you had in Catalonia. You know, basically rigged the whole thing so that Ireland now votes, hey, we just squeak by, yay, we want to join the EU. And they said, okay, now you can never vote on that ever again. You can never, ever, ever have another referendum on the EU.
That sounds like such bullshit. That's awful.
Yeah, it's like the mafia type tactics.
Yeah, I really liked Seamus Coughlin's Freedom Tunes bit on his understanding of the EU. Did you see that one?
I don't think I saw that one.
His understanding of Brexit, and basically it was this guy in like a colonial getup talking to this king, and it's all like, so we want to leave the EU. And the king freaks out. You what? Also, you went to Australia. You can't take the EU. That's racist.
Yeah. What was interesting is like if you watch British TV, if you watch BBC, and I'm not just talking about news shows, I'm talking about like fiction, the people who are in favor of Brexit are depicted as stupid and racist and horrible people. But if you watch some of the other stuff like, you know, ITV or some of the Sky programs or things like that, it's almost the opposite. So it's just, you know, if you're watching the BBC, you are not getting like the full conscience of the people. You're getting it filtered through their government.
Yeah,
that's one I think is going to be interesting. That's one thing that's going to be interesting to see what Doctor Who does now that Russell T Davies is coming back. He's getting them completely out from under, you know, any and all direct BBC control. It'll just be licensed and distributed through BBC Worldwide, but it will be 100% a production of Bad Wolf Productions.
I'm not a Doctor Who fan, so I can't comment on that.
Yeah, the show has just always been plagued with, you know, higher ups, you know, the trying to do this or that, using it to grandstand, or, you know, it's popular, so let's ban it and things like that. You know, they really got it from like the moralists during those early Tom Baker years when it was more gothic horror and, oh, it's so horrible and it's corrupting the minds of the children and everything. And then, you know, in the 80s, the whole thing about, you know, them doing their best to try and just get it canceled forever. And the stories on Doctor Who got almost completely anarchist. But when Russell T Davies brought it back,
get woke, go broke story.
No, I mean, it was kind of the opposite. They were like, take down the government. That's literally what script editor Andrew Cartmel said when they were trying to find a new script editor, and the producer was interviewing him. And so he asked him, well, what do you hope to do as script editor of Doctor Who? And he said, take down the government. So he hired him.
I like that.
But when Russell T Davies brought it back in 2005, he moved production out to Wales So at least in Wales, you didn't have, the higher ups in London just right there breathing down their necks the whole time. But, it's still just a lot of the kind of, it's not even executive interference, because I think it's even above the executive level, but, the real higher ups at the BBC. And Soviet Russia car drive you, isn't that a Tesla? I don't think Russia had driverless cars.
Well, if you count the ones that just broke down and people abandoned, they don't have drivers anymore, right?
Yeah, you push the car instead of driving it. Sky News made a giant hit piece on 3D printed guns trying to tie them to terrorist groups. Yeah, they're bad in their own way.
The thing about 3D printed guns is just like, this is just an inevitability of technology.
It's going to happen. I mean, the difference
there have
is
been literal cases of people manufacturing guns in prison. I saw there was an episode of Mythbusters about this. They featured a museum exhibit where there was a semi-automatic 9mm pistol made out of plumbing parts that was built in prison.
In prison,
like, you can't keep guns out of the hands of people because people can just make them, right?
Yeah.
And it's just going to get easier as technology gets better, but it already is relatively easy. So
there was some big shooting recently. There was some big shooting. I forget where it was in America. I don't know if it was Australia or where, but this guy went and shot up a bunch of people with a homemade gun. I think it was a homemade shotgun.
Are you talking about the assassination of that Japanese prime minister?
That
was with a homemade gun.
I might be.
Yeah, that was just a homemade gun basically. Because Japan has like the most strictest gun control laws on the books basically, and so it's damn near impossible to get a gun. So this guy just made it himself and assassinated a prime minister. So, yeah.
JC, given the lag and the unreliability of the chat on my side, you can't just say Copenhagen because I won't know which part of the conversation you're talking about.
Or maybe a shooting in Copenhagen? I don't know.
Was there?
Yeah, the thing is that, like, you're never going to get rid, like, there's already, 300 million guns in the U.S., so you're never going, and we don't know how many there are because we don't keep track of them, and we shouldn't. And so many of them are just homemade anyways, like ghost guns. And there's just no way to, like, sure, you could pass a law that says that, you're not allowed to have a gun. And, half of the people who have that gun at least are going to go, they're going to go out to the woods and bury it or whatever, because they're not going to give that up. They're going to make sure that they can get it if they need it. And just say, well, I actually sold that years ago. I don't have any records. Sorry.
Well, apparently what I'm looking at now, they searched that guy's home and they found all sorts of homemade guns there.
Yeah, and it's just going to become easier to make homemade guns. It already is pretty easy.
Yep.
So, yeah, this idea that you're ever going to control the industry so much that it actually makes it so difficult for crazy people to get guns, that, and I'm specifically talking about these mass shooter types that typically, they don't have much of a criminal background, if any, and then they just one day get snap crazy and decide to shoot up a theater or whatever.
Well, and it's not even that snap thing, because a lot of them will spend months planning it out which is why things like waiting periods won't deter them.
True, but it's like all of the sudden out of the blue for the rest of the people, this guy just decides to kill a whole bunch of people, and that kind of thing you can really never prevent from happening. And even if you could keep them from getting guns or bump stocks or whatever, they're going to figure out some other way to kill people. And sometimes they're going to
just
be
build
more effective.
a bomb.
Yes, like Timothy McVeigh did, which all it took was fertilizer and diesel fuel and a detonator that he made, I think.
Or like the Bath School massacre.
Bad people.
The Bath School massacre, which is still the deadliest school massacre in U.S. history, done with a fertilizer bomb.
Yeah, see, it's you can't. I like Penn Jillette's quote on this. You can't stop insane people from doing insane things with insane laws. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of keeping guns out of the hands of criminals, you can marginally affect that, and that people who have made some bad life choices in the past might be deterred from owning a gun if they know that it's a felony for them to own one after they've been convicted and prosecuted of previous violent crimes. Which is I'm okay with those kinds of laws, but those laws are already on the books. So we've basically done as much as we can in terms of keeping the guns out of the hands of repeat criminals.
The Copenhagen shooting, JC, was done with a Sig Sauer 200 STR. So
how did you get
bolt action?
It's a competition rifle. Let's see. Yeah, it's bolt action. Used for target and competition.
So it wasn't a scary AR.
Nope. Funny looking thing, actually.
Well, there you go. That just
and
goes
if you look at the recent assassination of Shinzo Abe, Japan, which has some of the most strictest gun laws in the world, I mean, none of those stopped a guy from making a homemade shotgun.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yep.
This thing fires the 6.5. You don't see many of those anymore.
Technologies.
The 6.5 millimeter.
All you need is a nail, a pipe, and another pipe, basically.
Yeah, a slam fire shotgun. Well, every time they do like one of those gun buybacks and it's like, oh, we'll pay you, $200 or whatever it is if you come and surrender all your guns, people just go to the hardware store, get $20 worth of stuff, build a slam fire shotgun, and turn them in to get the money. And most of what they get with those gun buybacks is homemade slam fire shotguns.
They did that whole gun buyback thing where they were going to send the guns to Ukraine, but they ended up getting fucking slamfire shotguns, 2 AR-15s, which, send those to the Ukrainians. But most of them were 22 sporting rifles that you would use to shoot tin cans.
Yeah, and I don't know how much success you're going to have after what the British did in World War II, because they were like, well, we're afraid of the Nazis, invading us, and none of us have guns. Please, Americans, send us some guns, send us some good guns. And Americans donated all sorts of guns to harm the British population. And then after the war was over, the British government seized them all and dumped them into the sea.
Oh.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, even then,
nothing like the Nazis will ever happen again. Yeah. We don't need these.
Well,
it already happened.
The Sten gun is an example of an emergency weapon, which, for the most part, it's not reliable. It's not that great of a gun, but during an emergency, it was developed. But it's so simple that you can actually just make it with crap you could find from Home Depot.
Yeah. It's scary what you can get from Home Depot. If you look at Deviant Olam's YouTube channel, he talks about all sorts of stuff you can just go to Home Depot and buy and break into all sorts of places.
You can buy 22 blanks at Home Depot for a nail gun, and you could probably finagle that into a firearm.
You can
easily.
buy master keys that will allow you to bypass a lot of those really sophisticated, you know how you have like the keypad entry or the card entry or things like that. They always have that keyhole on it for a master key. Yeah, those things are fairly standard, and they hardly ever rekey them.
Well, I mean, vending machines are a hilarious example where they put the
Yeah.
code right on there, and you could just take a picture of the code, go online and say, okay, 207 vending machine key, order
Yeah.
it, and you can just take everything out of it.
Yeah. Well, the TSA did something where they were bragging about their master keys that could, open, everyone's luggage, so your luggage can be secure, but we can always, search it if we need to, but no one else can open it. They posted pictures of their keys, and everyone was 3D printing keys and just opening luggage with them, just from the pictures.
Well, I have a Z600 workstation, an old one, and it actually has a key that you can actually lock to prevent people from getting in there. But the funny thing about all those computers that use keys to lock down the system is they were just made from vending machine keys. So you could just buy the vending machine keys and use them on the computers.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently in the early 90s, a lot of car manufacturers used only a small number of different keys for their cars. So there were cases where people, somebody might be driving a green Toyota Camry, and they parked it next to another green Toyota Camry. And then went into the bank, came out, and mistakenly got into the wrong green Toyota Camry and started driving away. And then they were pulled over for driving a stolen car, and that they thought it was their own car.
Yeah. When I started driving, we had there were two Chevys. There was a Chevelle. It was just a normal, sedan type car. And then there was a pickup, and I forget what model the pickup was. But the keys worked on each other. You could use the Chevelle key and start up the pickup and vice versa.
Exactly.
That was the kind of to have. Are they a curious question? With all the anti-smoking things nowadays, are they still allowed to do the cigarette lighters in cars anymore?
Yeah, they just don't call them that. They call them power ports.
Oh.
Because people plug all sorts of things in it. They plug in USB chargers and CD players and things like that.
Do they ever? I mean, it's been 30 years since they've. I've seen a car with an actual cigarette lighter attachment in that, though.
Oh, you mean the actual lighter where you plug it in, wait, and it comes out and it's red hot? Yeah.
Well, my dad's truck, it was made in 2003, and it had a cigarette lighter thing.
Yeah. Let's see. My parents' minivan, which was a 1992 or 91 GMC Safari, had a cigarette lighter thing in it.
Oh, remember
last one
the
I
ashtrays?
saw. Oh yeah, the ashtrays.
Now they're changed.
Yeah, change trays, yeah.
I think that is, a lot of that is that a lot fewer people smoke. Well, some fewer people smoke. Maybe there's half as many smokers nowadays.
It was legal regulation, to be honest.
I don't know how many new smokers there are, but existing adult cigarette smokers have quit in 10 years. So there's kind of a half-life.
I thought it was more like a regulation that was put forward to try to I don't know, discourage people from fucking smoking.
Maybe, but I'm not aware of anything.
Or it could be some sort of ruling that they would be susceptible for lawsuits.
Yeah.
It
I don't
might
know.
just be. It might just be the fact that
Well-
there's not as much demand for it. I mean, smokers are not
Yeah.
not really, short on ways to light their cigarettes. That's not something they would be without.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a PR aspect to it. If you're selling a product to everybody, and included in that product is a device to make it easier for you to smoke, you're kind of implicitly endorsing smoking, and people don't like that.
But if you call it a change
Well, what do
tray,
you
but it
think
works
of the-
perfectly well as an ashtray, then you can appease that.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of that legal case they had a while back where the tobacco companies had to agree to stop putting I think it was the advertising in the movies thing.
Oh, the product placements, yeah.
That sounds like a violation of free speech to me.
It's totally a First
But I
Amendment
have a
violation.
pretty-
It was a violation back in
Yeah.
the 70s when they said that they, couldn't run television ads, or whenever that was.
Yeah, I think so.
And I
The
remember,
government has
opening up.
interpreted
Well,
it.
why did
I
it go
remember
through?
opening up magazines and seeing, big full page ads with the Marlboro Man. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
there's
it's
actually
ridiculous.
there was a tabloid magazine that ran a couple ads for menthols, I think.
I wonder if I owned a magazine, couldn't I put a full page advertisement in it for Marlboro? If Marlboro did not come to me, did not ask me to advertise, but I just thought, you know what? I think smoking's
Well-
great, and this is the brand that I like, and I'm going to promote it anyway.
I mean,
Well, you need to
it's
get
just this weird
Marlboro's
thing.
permission
I don't know.
to use their trademark.
I mean, it'd be an interesting.
Well, okay, maybe to actually use their
Well,
logo, but I can
yeah,
still
that's
say
a
whatever
problem.
I want about Marlboro, right?
That's even a problem with if
Well,
you're an indie filmmaker and you're running around getting location shots and there's like a McDonald's in the background or something and the logo's visible, you got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
But
What you can argue is plain sight, I believe. I was reading on
You
one
can,
legal
yeah.
website is you can argue what?
As long as you weren't like really trying to get it in, as long as it was just part of the environment.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
incidental in the background
Yeah.
of an urban location where, there's no way that you're going to get the 24 different company logos that are
Yeah.
off in the background, and you're not focusing on those anyways. They're in the
If you
background.
did a movie,
But if you set
if
a
you
scene
did
in McDonald's and then you get a close up of a McDonald's store and the McDonald's sign is an establishing shot, yeah, that's different.
yeah.
But where's that
The-
line
if you
drawn? It's
make a
fuzzy.
movie, if you make a movie in New York and you have a scene in Times Square, it's a little bit hard
Right.
Oh,
to
yeah.
film it in a way where the fucking
Oh, yeah,
billboards
that's
aren't
not
there.
happening. But like when we shot Housekeeping, for example, we had a pan over. The idea was this very messy room with things everywhere, and so there were, you have the TV remote and the DVD player remote and all of that. We turned all the remotes upside down so that you couldn't see the logos, or put a sock over them or something so you couldn't see the logos. But then we also shot a scene in a pub, and of course pubs have Michelob and all this other stuff around. That,
Yeah,
the
advertising.
the pub was actually open when we were doing it. It was early in the day, so they only had like a few regulars there. They became extras in the film, but but yeah, it's
you
just
need a
we
release
had
to do
no
that?
opportunity. We had no opportunity to redress and avoid those logos.
So, do you need a release if you're filming and you have permission from the property owner? If it's during business hours, do you need a release from the customers?
I don't know. I got one anyway, just to be on the safe side. I usually in the front of my camera bag, I usually have like 10 or 20 release forms with me, just in case someone walks in the background. Hey, get that guy to sign a release, because otherwise you have to blur out their face, and it's
Yeah, especially if you're shooting in something like a bar. Who knows? One of the guys in the background might be recognized by his wife, and he's been trying to keep his uh, drinking habits a secret. And then she sees this video or film online, and hey, wait a minute, that's my husband in the
Yeah.
bar within the
Yeah.
last.
But no,
Yeah, that would cause a
this
lot
was
of
so
problems.
earlier in the day. This was like 3 in the afternoon. It was only just like a
Ah,
handful
yeah,
of regulars.
drinking at 3 in the
Well, no,
afternoon. What a
they were just
scandal!
no, they were no, they were just regulars that just kind of show up there every day and
He's a
just
regular
kind
now. Oh, dragging his
just kind
name
of
through
hang
the
out. So,
mud.
but I mean, the point is, the bar owner knew them and was able to talk to them like, can we do this? It's
Such
like,
a
yeah, okay, just
regular. He knew him on a first name basis.
yeah. No
You
one
are
had anything to
exposing
hide
yourself
there.
to so much liability.
I like doing film. I like doing the just going out, and I take pictures, and sometimes I put them online for sale, stuff like that. So what I learned is that depending on the building, if you're in a town or whatever, uh, there are sometimes cases where architecture is somehow intellectual property.
Oh yeah, that's crazy stuff there. But again, you
And
have
it's like,
the natural environment exception.
yeah. Plus, it's in public view. That's one exception
Yeah.
I've heard, is that if you're standing on the sidewalk and you're just filming what you can see, then
And it's just kind of in the background, yeah. Yeah, you're usually pretty good with that.
Yeah, well, the lines get blurred if you chose that particular background. Like I'm just thinking of in the movie Sleeper, in the background of one of the shots, it's Mile High Church, which is actually um, not too far from where I live. Anyway, but they chose that particular building because it's this domed building and it's got a really interesting architecture. And I can imagine that it could argue, hey, you're capitalizing off of this investment
Well,
we made
it
in this architectural.
if
depends
you're a
on the
big
age
studio,
of the
if you're a
building.
big studio, you've got the budget and the personnel to go and do that. Like Kevin Smith shot Clerks as basically, it wasn't a student project. It was after he graduated film school, but he just made it as a project on his own. When it was picked up by Miramax, they were shooting in a convenience store, and so there were logos all over the place in the background. They did cover the logos on products that were shown in close-up. But, the background is just kind of, usually there's an exception for that. But Miramax actually went through, saw what logos there were visible, contacted all those companies and got releases for it. So, I mean, if you're a big studio, you can do that.
Yeah. There was how do documentary filmers I've been watching be it documentaries on like I think it's Drug Inc. and like they kind of like go to drug dealers and they kind of interview them and shit like that.
Yeah.
How do they actually legally get away with that? Because
freedom of the press. A documentary filmmaker is considered press. And press freedoms are a lot more secure than speech freedoms. All of those exceptions people are talking about with freedom of speech do not apply to freedom of the press. That's why it's a lot harder to sue, like CNN or someone for defamation than it is to sue, some Joe Blow somewhere.
Yeah, it's also it's not a crime to it's not a crime to not go to the police and inform them about a crime. Maybe in cases where you know that they're going to murder somebody, there might be some obligation there, but nobody's ever obliged to turn in a drug dealer. So, what are they going to do?
And particularly with filmmakers, that this was sorted out a long time ago. You can't say, oh, well, you're promoting, drug dealers and this is drug paraphernalia and we're going to, arrest you for all of that. That was sorted out a long time ago. You can't do that because the documentary filmmaker is not causing the drug deals to happen. He's just observing them and, maybe asking questions, interviewing the people involved, but he's not actually involved in the illegal activity. He's not encouraging the illegal activity. He's documenting what's going on. He's just an observer.
So if a police officer pulls somebody over, they're doing a documentary, and let's say one of the people was doing drugs, is the documentary filmer like involved in a crime there, or
If they can prove that they were participating in a drug transaction, but interviewing a drug dealer isn't doing that. That's just,
Yeah.
that's
I don't know.
I mean, they're going to
cops-
arrest you and make your life hell anyway. And remember, the process is the
what
punishment.
they're definitely going to do is they're going to offer you a plea bargain to release your footage to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering that because a lot of these documentaries will film people doing drugs and stuff like that. So I've always wondered, well, how do they like get around a lot of it? It's kind of
Because the documentary filmmaker is not actually doing it.
Right.
okay.
And, the fact that they have a camera crew there and stuff actually goes a long ways to bolstering their defense. Sometimes there's this guilt by association where if you're at a party and everybody's doing drugs, then they tend to assume that you're doing drugs too. And it can get legally tricky, although they still have to prove that you are participating.
There was I don't know if this is still on the books, but in the Bush administration, they passed a law that said that if people were like smoking marijuana in a circle and passing it around, you weren't smoking, but you just took the marijuana cigarette from the person on your right and just handed it to the person on your left, you were drug trafficking.
Drug trafficking, yeah.
Drug trafficking,
So
yeah.
Well, there are
That's what the Bush administration said.
That they there are technicalities like that they are going to try to get you with, but that's not what's typically.
Well, that's like
happening
when they got O.J. Simpson for kidnapping, when it really just should have been unlawful detention because they just held that security guard in place. Because kidnapping is when you remove someone and take them to a different place. Unlawful detention is where you just keep them where they are. When he was stealing back like his Heisman trophies and all that. There was I don't understand how they were legally able to take all that stuff from him to begin with. But anyway, he was stealing him back.
Isn't that unlawful?
Because by keeping him there, he was keeping him with the rotating earth, and so he was moving him with the rotating earth.
What they said was they made him move from one side of the room to the other. And they said that was transporting him to another location, and therefore it was kidnapping.
Was it west to east or east to west?
I don't. They just said, that moving from one side of the room to another was transporting to a different location, and so it was kidnapping and not detention.
I can understand unlawful imprisonment and unlawful detention, but kidnapping?
Yep, they got him for kidnapping.
Holy shit.
Because that gets you a much bigger sentence than unlawful detention.
Yeah. What do you think about the O.J. Simpson case with the whole glove thing? Was
that whole prosecution was absolutely ridiculous. I have no clue if O.J. did it or not, but the prosecution had such a ridiculous case. I mean, when you consider they made sure to get like a couple like jurors who had a history of like voting guilty every time. Yeah, they got their secured jurors. And even then they got a unanimous verdict in like 4 hours.
Yeah. And even then they could have the whole glove thing was a little bit like one could argue, okay, you have a glove that was used in a murder. It's obviously shrunken to a degree. So how can we use this as a defense argument when it's not going to fit regardless?
That was the prosecution's stupid fault. Because they didn't have any problem with any of that until after the gloves did. But before then, they were like, yeah, watch this. The gloves are going to fit. The gloves are going to fit. The gloves are going to fit. And then when they didn't fit, they were like, oh, well, they shrunk, and he was spreading his hand out, and he didn't take his arthritis medicine, and after the fact, they had all sorts of excuses as to why it didn't fit when they didn't say any of that ahead of time.
Beforehand.
Yeah, they didn't say any of that beforehand.
They could have said it beforehand and say, okay, this glove right here as evidence, it's not going to fit. However, they could have suggested an identical glove with the identical size.
Oh no, they did that, and it was so ridiculous. They bought this pair of gloves. Yes, these are identical gloves, and he puts them on and they fit, and it's like, what was that supposed to prove? They're not the gloves that were from the scene. And why were the gloves supposed to be where they were?
It's probably pretty easy to take a glove. I'm not saying he necessarily, I would have to look more closely at the photos, but it's probably pretty easy to make it look like the glove doesn't fit, and that, I can only get it on the tips of my fingers, and that, depending on whether you want it to look like it's going to fit or not,
I don't know. It looked pretty convincing to me. But, I mean, he was wearing the latex gloves underneath it, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not.
Yeah, depending on the type of material, that could add a lot of friction.
It just should have been allowed to go through.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much of that case was ridiculous. But what was it about, like, one glove was found, like, at the scene while he was running away. The other one was found in his house, but it was around the back. What, when he got home, did he do a couple of laps around the house first and lose the glove at the back?
Yeah. The whole thing, they did not handle that crime scene well. They did not.
No, they didn't. They didn't handle the prosecution well. They didn't handle anything well.
What do you think about the Casey Anthony trial?
I covered that. I mean, my opinion is, and we won't know unless he's tried, but my opinion is it was probably the father. But it's like they had reasonable doubt all over the place in that one. And they were saying like, well, she wasn't sad afterwards. She went to a party or what. What happened after a murder has absolutely nothing to do with whether you're guilty.
I want to go so far
that would be an argument of...
I would...
That wouldn't be...
Yeah, well, a person who commits a murder is not going to feel that as distraught or worried about where that person is. So there are definitely behavioral patterns.
Well, I mean, clearly she did. Clearly she didn't care anything.
Whether they committed a murder or not.
Clearly she didn't care anything about her child, but that doesn't mean she murdered.
Yeah. No, that you're right. Yes, she. Yes, on both of those things, you're totally right. She clearly didn't care anything about her child. I think, all of the footage and all the time she was lying to investigators and stuff, she's clearly like a psychopath. I have absolutely no sympathy for her.
She's got issues. Now, I'm not saying she doesn't.
Oh, yeah. But
what about
that was what the jury said.
So out there, and some of her tweets and something like right after when it would have happened if she killed her kid, she had said something like, "I've made a decision, and I'm so happy that I did this now." And she was going out partying, and it's like, it's very circumstantial.
But that's what the jury said. It's like they didn't like her. They thought that she was crazy. They thought that she should be locked up, but there was no actual evidence that she did it.
Yeah.
And everything really seemed to point to the father. I mean, Casey Anthony's father.
Well, what about JonBenet Ramsey thing? That hasn't been solved.
I don't know whatever happened with that.
Yeah, that one hasn't. That one's a lot more.
That one's very twisty turny.
I mean. Right,
I wouldn't at all be surprised.
I
wouldn't be at all surprised if it turned out that one of the parties involved was a time traveler, given all of the contradictory stuff about that.
Yeah,
there's some time travel paradoxes going on there. That's the most likely explanation.
Because
it really
could
have been an intruder. It could have been the mother. It could have been the brother. It could have been. It could have been any of them, or an intruder. So there's, it's a good thing that never went to trial, because there just wasn't enough evidence. It was
Well,
really tragic.
any one of them could have pointed to the others for reasonable doubt.
Yeah, because they thought it was a family friend, or they thought it was this or that, and it was just like, there's no case here to prosecute, basically.
Well, and if you're defending yourself, you don't have to limit yourself to one theory. The prosecution does. The prosecution has to say, this is what happened step by step, and the defense can throw out, 100 different possibilities. And as long as even one of those possibilities is reasonable, you have reasonable doubt and you have to acquit.
Or if the sum of them is reasonable, then you've got reasonable doubt. Like, let's say you're 90%, or if it wasn't this person, well, there's a 5% chance it was this person, and a 5% chance it was this person, and a 10% chance it was that person. Well, that's 20%.
Well, it was very it was very interesting to go look through the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, because a lot of that trial was they were making just like amateur mistakes, where the prosecution was making amateur mistakes.
Mistakes. No, those were malicious. That was malicious misconduct.
It was deliberate. They knew what they were doing. They knew goddamn well what they were doing.
Right. What was the name of that prosecuting DA who brought
the main one was Thomas Binger. The main one was Thomas Binger, the one with his Binger finger on the trigger.
Binger bringing up Rittenhouse's post-arrest silence in front of the jury.
Yeah.
That is like...
Oh my God, the dressing down he got from the judge on that. It was like he was at the principal's office.
Oh, he should have been thrown in jail.
He should be disbarred. He should be disbarred.
Yeah, he should be disbarred. Absolutely. Yeah.
He's not going to be.
That was the... I heard that just before I heard any commentary. I heard that. I was like, what are you doing? That is just the most blatant violation of prosecutorial ethics I've ever heard of.
They didn't have a case, and they knew it, so they were pulling out every dirty trick in the book.
Yeah.
Because consider, as high profile as this case was, all of the eyes of the nation on it, people dead, everyone, screeching, all the news talking about it, the whole world talking about it. The DA doesn't take the case. He tosses it down to the deputy. The deputy doesn't take the case. She tosses it down to a couple of assistants who can't toss it down to anyone else. They couldn't drop the case and save face, but none of them, anyone who was able to pass the case on to someone else and not prosecute it themselves, did so. Until it got to those two.
Yeah, they got the one guy, the most zealotous. Yeah, this guy, he had his political motives.
Binger and Krause are like two of like 20 some assistants that they have.
They remind me of the Beavis and Butthead characters.
Oh my God, that point where Krause face palmed after after what's his face, Lefty, I forget his name, Gage Grosskreutz, admitted that that Rittenhouse didn't fire while he had his weapon lower and only fired after he raised it. And the case was over.
Yeah.
I mean, the case had already been over. They had nothing. But as soon as like your star, victim goes and says that, yeah, it's over. It's done.
Then the whole handbrake situation.
Handbrake?
So what happened was they had given basically the drone footage in question.
And they had run it through Handbrake, yeah.
The drone footage, they threw it in Handbrake and they cranked it down.
Handbrake, for people who don't know,
had a better quality.
Hold on a second. For people who don't know, Handbrake is basically a video reconverter. If you've got a video that's too big, and you want to crunch it down or you want to make it lower resolution, Handbrake is great software to do that. I use it all the time. Anyway, go ahead.
And what they did was they took the prosecutor's video, they threw it into the Handbrake. They tried denying it, but they cranked the settings all the way down, and basically you couldn't see what was going on. And it took until them saying, "Oh, you have to show the one that the prosecutor got." That everybody was like, "Oh, that's what really happened."
Well, and you see, here's the part that the prosecutors didn't know, that someone in the defense found out. Handbrake, when you recompress something with Handbrake, it puts that in the metadata that it was run through Handbrake. And you just look at the metadata and you can say, and someone saw that and gave them a screenshot, say, look, this was gone through Handbrake. This is not the original. And that crap they were trying to do with the AI goes back to what we were saying earlier. That was a great line, for the defense, hocus pocus out of focus.
Yeah. The problem is when they tried, I think, wasn't that when they tried upscaling it to 4K or something?
Well, they had this like AI software that's supposed to fill in all these missing details. And like I said earlier in this very live stream, it's called hallucinating. That's really what it's doing, because the details are not there. And the AI is just going to make up something that it thinks the viewer would believe, because it's not there to like bring out any sort of truth or anything like that. It's just there to make it more visible for like a casual viewer watching a movie or something like that. And so they had all this where I think they spent like 20 hours tweaking all these settings to try and prove that Rittenhouse pointed his gun at the first guy, Rosenbaum, before he ran. And they had like one frame and they were like distorting it and blurring it and twisting it. And even then, you couldn't see anything.
That sounds like tampering with evidence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's totally. But they were trying to say, ooh, look, shiny thing. It's AI, it's techie, so that means it's true. No, it doesn't.
But even then, there's a question of ethics when you put an AI through there. It's kind of...
Yeah.
That seems unethical.
You can't cross-examine an AI. That's the main problem.
Well, I mean, if it's HAL, you could do it, but it'll just have a nervous breakdown.
But, I mean, it's no different, and this is like I said earlier, because Executioner, you weren't here for this, so I apologize to everyone who was watching earlier. This is a repeat. But it's no different than if you had an artist painting in the details. It's no different.
Yep.
Because the information is not there. The AI is not working with information that's there. It's putting in its own information of what it thinks might be the case.
True.
And that's all it's ever going to be. That's all it ever can be. Because AI cannot give you some channel to ultimate truth or anything like that. It only works with what's there, and it can't make information in the picture exist when that information is not there.
Yeah.
It can only just draw in what it thinks might have been.
Yeah. On a different note, did you see that video where Adam something was trying to debunk the idea of a Mars colony?
I didn't see that, no.
I put that in the debunk section, but basically he pulls out all the straw men of basically why we shouldn't have a Mars colony and blah, 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 and was just repeating the same talking points over and over again.
I'll have to check all that when I come back from vacation, but I haven't had a chance to with all the stuff.
Yeah,
I'll
check
the
it
whole
out.
thing was over Elon Musk.
Yeah, for people who are just not intimately familiar with all of the solutions to various engineering problems, it becomes very easy to assume that other people have not figured out ways to do things, or just to assume that that solutions out there don't exist. And the flip side of that is that sometimes there are people who just assume that certain technical problems, which aren't really so much technical problems as physical barriers, like faster than light travel, well, that's just something that we need to develop the technology for. No, there's laws of physics that's suggest it's most likely completely impossible. No amount of technology will ever break the speed of light.
Well, and they'll say like, well, the sound barrier was supposed to be this thing and we broke it, but we've always known that there are things that travel faster than sound. That was never a limit of laws of physics or anything.
Yeah.
It was just an engineering challenge because when you hit the speed of sound, you need this extra little burst of energy to get past it. Which is the big reason why we don't have supersonic planes, because it's just so expensive to have the fuel to just go that extra, 100 miles an hour or so just to get you to your destination a little faster. It's just not worth it.
Well,
the video was bringing up radiation.
What now?
Typically, with the way that the drag equation works, the amount of force, the drag force, is proportional to the square of the speed that you're traveling, and also when you transition the sound barrier, the drag coefficient actually spikes up a bit. And then the amount of power that it takes is also proportional to the speed. So it's the speed times the force. So the amount of power that it takes goes up as a cube of the speed that you're increasing. So a plane going at 600 miles per hour versus 800 miles per hour, disregarding the aerodynamics that you would have to apply to your vehicle to transition through the sound barrier, that just in itself more than doubles the amount of power that you need to run through those engines. So the economics alone are forget about the speed of sound, just the economics alone. There's a pretty abrupt, or it's pretty limiting to travel faster.
Well,
speaking of aerodynamics, I never understood this. Why did the Concorde have that like downward pointing nose thing?
Well, it had it because it needed visibility. So what happens is when you're on the runway, the nose is pointed downward so you can see where you're going. And once it got up in the air, the nose would become straight.
Ah, okay. I was wondering about that.
I think it had to have a pretty high attack angle when it was traveling at low speeds in the lower atmosphere. Without that
visibility was one reason.
Right. But if you're traveling with that high attack angle, because the wings were fixed, right? Then the nose is sticking way up in front of you. So yeah.
Yeah. With Adam Something's video, he tried saying, radiation in Mars, and even though there was a guy who did a debunking on Adam Something, but the thing is, on Mars, there are different areas where the radiation is worse than other places. And there are other places on Mars where I forgot the exact number, but it's the exact amount NASA says, okay, this is what we expect you to be at once you retire from space flight. And that's the safe zone.
Well, basically, if you put 10 tons of matter between you and the sky, 10 tons per square meter of matter between you and the sky, you're blocking out just as much radiation as you are standing on the surface of the Earth. And that would be the idea, is that a colony on Mars would be buried under Mars soil. So,
but it depends on what kind of radiation you're worried about. And when I see people like that, talking about radiation,
it's cosmic radiation,
I want to ask them. I just want to ask them, what the 3 types of radiation are, and see if they can tell me.
Well, it's actually not 3 types of radiation. When you're talking about radiation in space. You got X-rays coming from the corona. You've got
That's
protons from the solar wind. You've also got electrons in there as well. You have cosmic rays, which can be anything from, well, it's any kind of atomic nuclei traveling at relativistic speed.
Which would be alpha
and
particles.
occasionally you get small amount of gamma radiation too. But,
well, I mean,
so
X-rays are
there's a lot
gamma, and
more.
the photon radiation is gamma radiation, and
X-rays are well, they're not
they are.
exactly gamma.
They are.
They are both photons, but X-rays are at a much longer wavelength. But X-rays can be shielded by a thin layer of metal, whereas gamma rays require thick shielding.
But gamma rays is generally considered. For the types of radiation, you have gamma radiation, which is the photon, beta radiation, which is the neutron, and then alpha radiation, which is the alpha particle, which is basically protons and neutrons, essentially a helium
Beta
nucleus.
radiations are electrons, not neutrons.
The electrons, yeah. But yeah, that's the ask them the cookie question and see. You guys know what the cookie question is, right?
In space, your primary source of radiation is actually coming from protons, which are not the three types of radiation that you get from radioactive emitters. That's coming from the solar wind. And then
that's not radiation. That's matter. Radiation is energy. You're talking about matter. You're talking about charged particles.
It's radiation in the same sense that alpha radiation is radiation.
I guess,
electrons are arguably matter as well. So, anyways, and then you have another problem with space radiation, in that you get secondary radiation, in that cosmic rays are so energetic that they fission a lot of heavier nuclei into a shower of high energy particles that'll hit you as well. So if you put a few centimeters worth of aluminum shielding, that actually can increase the radiation exposure in the interplanetary mission compared to just a thin wall of whatever. So
even on Mars,
there are definitely a lot of technical challenges, but there are solutions to all of these problems. I think a lot of the ways that people think about it is they just assume that, well, this has never been tried before, and therefore it must be impractical. But the reason it's never been tried before is because it requires a lot of money to lift all this matter up into space, right? And so,
and most of that is just getting it into low Earth orbit.
Right. If you can just get it to low Earth orbit cheaply, everything changes. The entire economics changes completely, and then suddenly all of it becomes possible, because we know that we can, like ever since the biosphere, we know we can create self-contained ecosystems, right? We know that the elements are present on Mars to do this. We know that we can design energy systems and industrial infrastructure and stuff to sustain this stuff. It's just a matter of economics. And once you figure out that if you can get it off the Earth cheaply, then that changes everything. Everything in space is so expensive because it costs so much to lift it up. Currently costs several $1,000s per pound to lift stuff up into low Earth orbit. And with the new Starship coming online, if they're fully successful at creating that fully and rapidly reusable, that very well could come down easily 2 orders of magnitude.
Now, which one are you talking about?
SpaceX Starship, their heavy lift reusable launch system. You're not familiar with this? So they've been developing this over the last few years. I mean, go check out the videos on it. It's really cool. It's about the size of a Saturn V. It's uses methane liquid oxygen engines. What was your question?
But my Thunderfoot.
Oh yeah, Thunderfoot, right? That guy. He, he
Yeah.
he's he's so he's so arrogant. You know, he thinks because he's got a PhD. That He's got a PhD in chemistry, and suddenly he thinks he's an expert on engineering. And he, when he goes after Elon Musk, he thinks his attitude is exactly the same as when he goes after other scam artists. A lot of what he covers are legitimately scams that he's covering, but he acts like SpaceX is in the exact same ballpark, and he's mocking them even though they have demonstrated success and they have stolen the majority of the launch market from established launch providers. They have a proven business model here.
Well, and if you want to talk about the Hyperloop, there was recently this one big, I forget the name of it, there one like this big engineering firm. And one of the Hyperloop projects, I think it was HTT, had them do an audit of like the whole system and talk about the engineering feasibility and, you know, how economical it would be. And this engineering firm did the audit and just gave them flying colors and liked it so much they became an investor. So, I mean, if you've got teams of engineers going, wait, this is great, we want in on that, why should I listen to some rando on the internet? You want to talk to me about the Hyperloop? Okay, show me your CV. Let me see what your expertise is.
Yeah, it's
on some things he's kind of good, but like on other things it's like
well,
maybe
it's like he doesn't really have the ability to discern truth from bullshit. He just goes after them, and if it so happens he goes after bullshit, he does really well. But if he's going something this tree, he goes after it as though he was going through bullshit, and he looks like an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. One of my earliest criticisms was of a video that he did about Kent Hovind, and it put me in the really weird position of actually defending Kent Hovind's argument, which is, I think it's a fun intellectual exercise to actually defend some of your intellectual opponents at times. But,
what was the argument?
Thunderfoot was saying, he highlighted this video where Kent Hovind was saying that the flood could have been caused by a collapsing ice shield around the Earth, and that was held up by the atmosphere. And, you know, as ridiculous as that is, Thunderfoot's criticism was that, well, if that happened, if a 2-meter thick ice shield around the planet broke, then it would dump as much energy into the surface of the planet as this Atlas rocket or Titan rocket that he showed exploding. Because he thought that, oh, well, rocket engines are fairly efficient, and therefore, you know, a spacecraft that puts about a 1-ton payload into space requires as much energy as, you know, something sitting in space. And he just totally did not understand that there is a huge difference between an object sitting stationary relative to the ground in space and moving at orbital velocities. Plus, he doesn't understand that the propulsive efficiency of a rocket engine has nothing to do with the energy efficiency of the launch system as a whole. And I actually ran the numbers. I ran the numbers, and it showed that the energy released in that explosion was almost 5 orders of magnitude higher than it really would have been. The actual amount of energy would have been just enough to melt about half of the ice. It would not have caused this gigantic fireball. He was off by about 5 orders of magnitude, 4 or 5.
But it's just like when we were debunking him on the Hyperloop, he doesn't really understand that you can't really compare different types of energy, because he was talking about, you know, making the Hyperloop a near vacuum, you know, 100 pascals, and how much energy it would take. And it would take like so many tons of TNT. It's the equivalent energy. And I forget, Fourth,
Well,
whether it was you or me that did this, but one of us looked at that and figured out that it would be, for the electricity charge for that, it would be less than $5 worth of power.
yeah, yeah. See, the thing is, like, it's easy to, if you give your measurement of the amount of energy in terms of grams of TNT or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Well, that evokes an image of an explosion, and you think, wow, it's like trying to contain an explosion. It's like, no, because that now you're causing the audience, or the illiterate audience, to conflate energy and power. TNT has a grenade has about as much chemical energy inside of it as like a candle or a few birthday candles, right?
Yeah.
But the difference between them is how slowly or quickly that energy is released, and it's just so intellectually dishonest when he tries to make this, evoke these images that are obviously tailored to communicate some sort of incredulity in the physically illiterate, and that's where he's making his arguments. It's awful.
Well, and that's the thing with engineering. A lot of the stuff with engineering is counterintuitive. That's why you have to, go to college for 5 years to learn it. You can't just go and do it, because you have to learn all of the things that your intuition is going to tell you, one thing, and you got to learn how it really is. And he doesn't really seem to understand that. And he's using his intuition, trying to think like the way it works in his head.
It might be a bad idea instead of a good idea.
Yeah, the way it works in his head, he makes a lot of mistakes.
The thing about engineering, though, is that it doesn't take all that much education if you have the right frame of mind while you're taking it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get a degree in engineering, but I did take a couple of higher level physics courses, or maybe not higher level. I think they were 2000 level courses, but they were the calculus based ones, so they were moderately advanced. But the thing was, I did really well in those courses because I always approach, especially questions about physics, with a state of mind where whenever I'm presented with some sort of information that is very counterintuitive, I make it a priority to reconfigure my model of the world so that those counterintuitive concepts are no longer counterintuitive and they become intuitive.
You just update your worldview about it. Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't practice that skill enough. And they might know intuitively, or they might know as a matter of fact that, oh, you can't go faster than the speed of light, but they don't reform their worldview about what that actually means to understand intuitively why. They don't imagine things like how time-space distorts as you approach the speed of light, or how an observer. I'm babbling. You know what I'm saying. They don't change their worldview.
What do you think of the whole? What is it? It's not futurism, but it's kind of the people who think that. Actually, it kind of is that. What's his name again? Michio Kaku? Not sure.
Yeah, Michio
He's an
Kaku.
astrophysicist.
What about him?
What do you think about? Has he ever done like kind of? I'm trying to remember this, but what do you think of the whole? It's not in his crowd, but it's kind of like the whole kind of like the overboardness with transhumanism. What do you think about, like, is there like a middle ground where it's in the future technology will be better, allow us to live longer, but do you think there's kind of where people take it too far into like the scientism place?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way
it's really hard to speculate how technology is going to change our lives, especially when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, because then we've got the prospect of a intelligence explosion, which is just so unbelievably difficult to predict that it'll change, and highly sensitive to what sort of um, utility function that AI has, that I hesitate to speculate at all.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be where you just have. I mean, we're doing it already. Well, we're living at 80 years old now, and people in their 80s are still physically active and everything. If the life expectancy is 80, and then by the time you get to 80, it's 100. Then by the time you get to 100, it's 120. It's going to increase, assuming nothing bad happens with society, and we turn into Venezuela or anything like that. As long as we keep progressing technologically, it's going to come to the point where we increase the life expectancy at a rate greater than 1 year per year.
I'm not so certain
that's the point where
that part of the way we would have, in order to extend life expectancy, we have to identify causes of death. So that would involve,
well, that's what we've been doing for 100 years.
Dying. Yeah, but that would involve, to cure old age, we have to observe people dying of old age. So I'm not so certain that it'll ever get to the point where we're extending life expectancy by more than 1 year per year, because then how are we making these observations of people dying of old age? But on the other hand, certain research could dramatically increase human life expectancy. I mean, we could develop biotechnology that will, extend our telomeres without causing cancer, and revert our cells to, how they were healthy in our late 20s or something. And
but I mean, keep in mind, the life expectancy doesn't mean everyone's going to live that long. It's it's kind of an average. So you'll still be able to observe people dying of various things.
Yeah,
but everyone as a whole will.
What do you think of? There was this kind of in relation to it, like the whole life expectancy thing. They were a couple of years ago. There were articles about like, oh, this person had their brain damage removed, like reversed through the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Then, I think it was not even a year after that, they were like, yeah, there's no evidence to suggest that the whole hyperbaric thing reverses brain damage.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about there.
There is an incentive within science, and by science in this context, I mean the publication industry, to exaggerate results. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if a paper was published that claimed, hey, this great thing happened, and then they couldn't replicate it. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Or something
works well.
Cells.
Or something works well with cells in a petri dish, but it doesn't really translate to working inside the human body.
Yeah, I can understand stem cells, because stem cell research has come a very long way, and it has done very good things for people who have had strokes and people who have had some mental impairment. But it doesn't, the whole hyperbaric oxygen thing, it just doesn't, I don't know, it's just.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, so I can't comment on it. But I mean, yeah, there have been searches for ways of stopping or even reversing neural damage for treatments for, like Alzheimer's, ALS, stuff like that. They're definitely working on the problem.
Yeah, sometimes small scale experiments don't really translate well when you try to scale it up.
Well, and also the human body isn't a petri dish. There's all sorts of different parts of the bodies, and things work differently in different places. Which is why some diseases can attack one part of the body but not another. You know, a lot of things don't get past the blood-brain barrier. A lot of things won't get past the placental barrier to infect a fetus. Some things can't get into the spleen or whatever. The human body is this really chaotic, messy thing.
Evolution's pretty interesting, though. Like seeing the evolution of biology, human anatomy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're getting the ability to fix genetic diseases, and you know, considering 100 years ago we didn't even have antibiotics, I think that's doing pretty good.
What do you think of the over-prescribing of antibiotics?
I think the real problem, I mean, the overprescribing didn't help, but the real problem is if you just keep using the same antibiotics, it's gonna happen. Eventually, all the germs around you are gonna evolve a resistance to it. You need novel new antibiotics, not just like the little updates of the previous antibiotics that they're doing. They need novel new antibiotics to prevent that from happening, so that you can give them, you can attack them a different way so they don't become resistant. That was basically stopped in its tracks by the Kefauver-Harris amendments, because now it is just so friggin' difficult. There's only been like a couple new. God, that was that was 60 years ago. That was 62. So it's 60 years ago this year, and there have only been like a couple novel new antibiotics, whereas before then we were finding them all over the place. And it wasn't a case where we were just finding. It wasn't just a case where we were just finding the easy ones first, because if you look at the development of it, as soon as they pass Kefauver-Harris, it hits a wall, and it just stops.
Kefauver-Harris.
Kefauver-Harris. That's the amendments that extended the FDA's mission so that they're not just about the safety of drugs, but the efficacy as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and naturally, Kamala Harris was named after this amendment.
Well, given how ineffective it is, I guess that's a good name.
Yeah. I mean, it's effective at stopping drugs from getting on the market and making people die because medication for their condition isn't available.
What was it called? The Kefauver-Harris amendment?
Kefauver-Harris. It's like KEVFAUFER -Harris, something like that. Hey, Darius, I've got a 2-part video on the Roe decision. So if you got an hour of your time.
It was in response to thalidomide,
which is ridiculous because
of 62.
Which is ridiculous because the FDA never approved thalidomide. I mean, they eventually did for some things in like the late 90s. But
the samples were brought into the country, but they were never FDA approved, so...
Yeah. And they were never given to any patients.
Well, 17 birth defects did result from the samples that were distributed. But considering how many thousands of people died from, I believe it was sleeping overdoses from
the barbiturates it was trying to replace.
Yeah, I mean, 17 birth defects compared to thousands of barbiturates, I mean...
Yeah. Yeah, and the solution is simple. Don't give it to pregnant women. That's all you have to do. Don't give it to pregnant women. It was just so dumb. And it's Sam Cedar. I have a Lord Killian debunking of Sam Cedar talking about it, where he can't even pronounce it. It's clear the guy's never even heard of it. He's just reading from this thing. But who knows where he got it from. And then he's acting like he knows all about it.
Do a video about asbestos?
Yeah, I debunked that one too. God, that was the one where he used his own dad.
Even though asbestos was mandated in buildings.
Yeah. They were trying to get them to let them use materials other than asbestos. They were like, please, we've got this other stuff other than asbestos. We want to use it. Please let us. And they wouldn't.
Well,
but God, he used his own father. That fucking pisses me off. If you use the death of your own father to push an agenda, you're nothing but a fucking piece of shit. And that's what Tom Hartman is. Pisses me off.
Well, they did as
yeah,
best
if you're willing to stand on the grave of your father, that's shitty.
It pisses me off that the Martin Luther King's estate still clings to that copyright of his speech.
Yeah,
that is
ridiculous.
Just such. That's such an
it's as
insult
ridiculous,
to his memory.
It's as ridiculous as the people claiming the copyrights to the Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah, exactly. Both of those copyright cases are the most infuriating. Yeah, she's been dead since 1945. We don't know exactly what date it was, but in 2012 or 2015 when her copyright was about to expire, the family tried to say, well, actually, the Diary of Anne Frank was really written by her father, and therefore the copyright is still valid, which, totally undermines the whole work.
Listen to me, Mr. No. Because, as most of you know, at least the long-time ones, I lost my second life to a drunk driver. The same accident that gave me the chronic pain I experience today. And I don't like drunk driving. And I will encourage people not to drive drunk. And I'll show you the statistics about it and all that. I will never, ever, ever, fucking ever use her death for that. Never. I don't care if he believes it. It's no fucking excuse. Sorry, but I feel strongly about
shitty.
that.
That's fucking shitty.
And that's not what I want to do with her memory. It's just not.
Well, that's the problem with people who they'll take the death of a loved one and they'll try to use it to how should I say it, like I don't know, a good example would be mass whatevers, mass shootings. The loved ones, they're manipulated by people into going onto a whole political thing when the best way to honor that person's memory would not be turning their death into something political.
Well, that's why I have no sympathy whatsoever for those Sandy Hook parents who just drove the force to go against Remington and drove them into bankruptcy. I have no sympathy for them. That is not what you do with the death of your children.
I hesitate to ever pass blame or criticize people for however they respond in the wake of tragedy. I mean, it could be that they feel that they're honoring those people if that's how they felt that past loved one wanted them to respond.
I would only feel that way if I'd never lost anyone. I would only feel that way if I never lost anyone. But I lost my father. I lost my wife. I lost my stepfather. I lost people close to me who I love very dearly. And so I know what that feels like. And so I know what kind of person you have to be to pull that shit.
Yeah. Have you ever lost somebody who that person was strongly morally invested in whatever thing actually took their lives, though?
What do you mean?
Like, let's say you knew somebody who was a strong critic of alcoholism, or uh, I, I'm just saying this because this is the easiest example to come up with. But if you knew somebody who was killed by a drunk driver, and that person during their life was always very outspoken about drunk driving, would you feel that it would be insulting to their memory, or perhaps honoring their memory, to take up the cause that they left?
If you
when
were
they pass?
continuing their work, that's one thing.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in situations where the person is continuing that person's work or advocacy, I can understand that.
Yeah, I can understand it, but it doesn't necessarily make it right, though. You know, if the work was to restrict somebody's fundamental rights, like I don't know, uh, I don't know, gun control or some shit, it's like I can understand that, but at the exact same time, it's like, you know, that's just fighting to. I don't know.
Like I said, it's plus I think we should generally tend to give people in grief a pass on a lot of their behavior, because when they're obviously, we can't expect them to think rationally about something that continues to plague them emotionally. So
I
mean,
can
if they're
understand
on the
that
acting
other
out,
when
hand,
you're
yeah,
making money,
if they're
when you're
acting
making
out,
money off of
yeah,
it.
if they're acting
yeah,
out, it's
that's what
one
I
Like,
thing. But there's a difference between acting
like
out and, I mean, whatever kind of car it was that hit us. I forget what it was. It was a pickup of some kind, but I forget the brand. Let's say it was a Ford. It would be like if I decided that I wanted to sue Ford because of what happened. I mean,
yeah.
that's
Well,
beyond.
and my attitude would be, that you're wrong to sue Ford, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to be kind of quiet on that, because I know that
Well,
you
I mean,
would
if you're
be
talking
emotionally
about if you're
compromised.
talking about in like the time after it happens, when you're just lashing out, that's when it's understandable.
Yeah.
Not fucking years later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a total difference between somebody who's grieving and somebody who is exploiting a tragedy, especially one that's supposed to have happened to them, or to
Yeah.
their loved one, and
what
using that to
happens when
garnish attention for their particular cause, or for themselves, to morally grandstand on top of the graves of their loved ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Like I
well,
say,
different.
Sherman's
I
making
will
money
talk
off of it.
against drunk driving, and I will tell people not to drive drunk, and all the way the importance of having a designated driver, and I will show you statistics, and I will do all of that. I might
Yeah,
mention
but you're not going to bring up your personal
I might
anecdote,
mention that. I might mention that, I
right?
lost
But
my
you're
wife
not
to a
going
drunk
to.
driver, but it would be more for the context of what I'm saying and where I'm coming from with it. I wouldn't
Right, you would
actually
have a
stand on her
personal
grave
reason.
and yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't actually stand
Right.
on her grave and.
It would be as inappropriate for you to use her death in an argument as it would be to use any other random drunk driver's death as an anecdotal argument, just as an emotional appeal. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
That's what
if
you're
it's
saying.
like a valid case study where it's like, okay, let's look at this situation because we can learn a lot from it, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's emotional bullying to say, that this happened to me and I'm grieving and I'm going to use that to attack your position.
Yeah, how dare you say these things? I find this offensive because of my, my loved one died, and therefore you got to shut up, that kind of thing. Yeah, I can't stand that either.
Yeah.
I mean, I even try to
Hartman-
think of what that might be like, with like my situation if I were to do that, with drunk driving. And the very thought of it just makes me sick.
Well, the thing with Hartman is he's making money off of it too. It's not just he's standing on the grave of his father, plus he's making money off of it, spreading this information about stuff, basically
stuff
lying.
That he could have easily looked up, stuff that he did look up and said wrong things about anyway.
Yeah.
There's other ways to impair your driving other than alcohol. That's true, and that's a valid point. Here's some other things you don't do. But it also kind of pisses me off. Like, you've seen those things that say, oh, if you talk on your cell phone when you're driving, it's as bad as if you're drunk driving. No. And when you look at the tests they've done, they're like, okay, we've got the person in this simulator or whatever safe environment they're doing it in. We've got them up to the legal limit of 0.08. Okay, you've gotten them slightly tipsy. The drunk who hit us was like 0.195, I think it was.
Yeah.
Get someone up to there and then see what the difference is. And also tell me how it is possible that talking on the cell phone while driving will make someone drive the wrong way at a high rate of speed down the interstate at night without running your headlights. Because that's what the drunk was doing with me. Tell me how you could do that with your cell phone, and then I'll be willing to agree that it's as bad as drunk driving. Until then, shut up, because you're a piece of shit. It's just like everyone wants their cause to like be the worst thing, and they try to portray, they like take the extreme worse of their position with just like very mild examples of others. Like, see, they're exactly the same. No. I mean, yeah, don't drive while talking on the cell phone. Please don't, because it's a bad thing to do. But it's just morally wrong, ethically wrong, and just inhumane to say it's as bad as drunk driving. It's not. And it's just like when you look at those psychics that claim to talk to the dead, and they get these people in tears because they think they're talking with their dead relative through this psychic. You can look at that and go, that's bullshit. But if you felt what it's like to lose someone, and you know how that person is being exploited by that, piece of shit psychic scumbag scam artists, that's what really gets you pissed off. That's where it hits you right where you live.
Yeah, Houdini.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was when he lost his mother that he really started going after the psychics. I mean, he was against them before, but losing his mother, that's what really got him going.
Well, why did the psychics gain so much ground in America?
They've kind of always been with us. But, there was a time when that was kind of the only thing they could do. Someone has an epileptic fit. They have no clue what epilepsy is. What is it? Oh, he must be possessed by a demons. Let's do an exorcism. I mean, I can forgive people, thousands of years ago when they didn't know any better for stuff like that. In the 21st century, no. Yeah, and texting while driving, JC. Yeah, still bad. Don't do it. But at least texting while driving would be momentary. That's done for, 10 seconds or whatever, which is plenty of time for bad stuff to happen. But if you're drunk driving, you're drunk the whole way.
A crazy thing happened to me on the way to work. a couple weeks ago. I wasn't doing anything bad. I wasn't on my cell phone. I didn't even have the radio on. It was just regular drive to work, paying attention and all that. I'm on the freeway going 70 miles per hour. It's 3 lanes wide. I get over to the right lane because the 2 lanes on the left, or the left lane and the center lane, have slowed down a little bit, and I'm on cruise control, and it's just easier to get over and pass that way. As soon as I get over, I can't exactly say why it suddenly appeared. Maybe another car swerved out of the way, suddenly revealing it, but there was a ladder in the middle of my lane on the freeway, 100 feet in front of me, and I'm going 70 miles per hour. So I swerved to the right where there was nobody on the shoulder to avoid hitting the ladder. But now I'm heading towards this concrete barrier. So then I start swerving to the left, and I was going so fast and swerving so hard that I started to spin out of control and now back into heavy traffic on the freeway. Bad. Yeah, and I spun around 180 degrees. Fortunately, really, really lucky. Didn't hit any other cars, didn't hit either of the 2 concrete barriers, didn't hit the ladder, nothing. The people who were to the left and behind me, they saw what was happening fast enough to stop, but I came to a stop looking at traffic on the freeway coming to a stop right in front of me. And I just was all like, okay, that little brushless vest was interesting. I don't need coffee anymore to start my work day. And I drove on the rest of the way to work with no incident.
I haven't had anything that bad, but I've had the close calls where, people pull out in front of you or whatever. You're trying to get over in a lane where you look in the lane. Worse. You look in the lane and you know it's clear, and then you move over and then someone honks their horn to get around you. Everyone's like, oh no, you were behind me, weren't you? You just sped around me. You just
I've had moments like that. This one, I totally span out of control and into highway traffic. It was a terrifying experience, but nobody got hurt, so yeah.
Well, that's a good thing.
Did you at least get the ladder out of the road?
Well, I was traveling so fast that I was a couple hundred yards down from where I was.
No, I mean after you stopped.
No, I just had to get going and rather than back up traffic and stuff. I'm not going to stop and walk 100 yards back to the ladder and move it.
Who turned off the lights?
Who turned off the lights? What lights?
Nah, have you ever seen that Doctor Who episode?
Oh, yeah. Hey, who turned out the lights? Yeah. The creepy thing is, instead of having the actor say it over and over again, they just use that same recording, and it was exactly the same each time. And so every time your brain heard it, it lost a little bit of the meaning and just became creepier and creepier. Like it was just this automatic noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, 10:25. Anything else you want to talk about before we call it a live stream?
I'm good.
All right. What about you, Fourth?
I think I've said my piece.
All right. Well, I'm going to call it off then and go to bed so I can get on vacation tomorrow. But thank y'all for joining me. And thanks to...
Always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Have a good night.
Thanks to Darth Fenrir, too.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone in the chat. Thank everyone who watched. And, of course, thanks all the supporters. Go to donate.bogosity.tv. Please help me out as much as you can. Thank you so much. Stay strong.